What is going on? It is Saturday night, and I haven't been streaming as much as I was hoping to this week. So I wanted to get on and talk about what's been going on this week. Obviously, the Deebo Samuel thing is the biggest thing that's really on people's mind right now. The whole unfollowing 49ers on Instagram, pictures that are either archived or deleted off of his page. I'll touch on that a little bit. I was going to do a mock draft or two. I have the tool pulled up here so we can have some fun, toy around with some different scenarios if you're into some draft stuff. And then if it's, depending on how it goes, I can, kind of keep it open. The last couple Saturdays we've done these. It's been, pretty open-ended towards the end. So we'll just see how it kind of kicks off and starts out. First of all, I hope everybody's having a good weekend. For those of you in the Bay Area, I hope you've been enjoying this beautiful weather we got. And, let's just jump into this Deebo Samuel thing. I personally don't think it's a huge deal. I think, honestly, we're at the point now where social media is it's been around for the better part of the last couple decades, but it's really becoming more and more a part of our everyday lives now, more so than it ever has been. And it will only continue to keep going that way in my eyes. So to me, just as much as somebody with their own business might use social media to help leverage them professionally and help them with their pursuits and their aspirations professionally, I think football players are going to as well. Deebo Samuel on his own has a platform and has a presence as himself, the individual on social media that has absolutely nothing to do with the 49ers. He has ways to monetize himself. He has ways to sell himself. He is a notable person and somebody that people care to hear from and want to see content from because of his individual ability and work ethic and the things he's done. So the way I'm looking at this is Deebo Samuel is kind of sending a reminder to not just the team, but to everybody that, hey, I'm Deebo Samuel, the individual. I'm Deebo Samuel, the athlete. I'm not just Deebo Samuel, wide receiver for the San Francisco 49ers. And I think he kind of sent a pretty clear message to everybody by, removing or scrubbing, however you want to call it. And to me, it really, and again, I could be wrong here. This is just speculation, but to me, when I'm looking at this from the outside in, I think it's more so just posturing and, again, kind of sending that subliminal message and saying, hey, like, I have no problem I'm not dependent on the San Francisco 49ers for my own brand. I'm not dependent on, having my own image be directly associated with the 49ers. I'm still Deebo Samuel at the end of the day. And that's enough for everybody that's going to consume my stuff and be interested in what's going on in the world of Deebo Samuel as a professional athlete in the year 2022. So I personally don't really think this is something to be that worked up about as of right now. I think, obviously there's some sort of driving force behind that. And, realistically, in my eyes, again, this is just a guess. I have no information. This is just me speculating off the top of my own head. I would imagine that they're engaged in some kind of negotiations because John Lynch has said multiple times that they are looking to get a deal done. They are looking to get both Bosa and Deebo taken care of as soon as possible. And in my eyes, what probably happened was the 49ers started with a number, and my assumption would be that Deebo Samuel, his representation, and whoever's handling that side of business for him was not a fan of the number that was presented to them. And the reason why I don't think that's a huge deal as of right now is that's generally how most negotiations go, right? The side that wants to get paid is going to come in at a really high number. The side that's writing the check is going to come in at a low number. And the hope is that you can find some kind of middle ground somewhere in between. There is more nuance when it comes to, specific examples, but that's basically how negotiations go in sports, right? So it's one thing if the 49ers are giving an offer and they're saying, this is our line in the sand, we won't budge from this, and Deebo Samuel has a problem with it, because then I think that's when you get into the world of, okay, well, if he thinks he's worth a certain amount and the 49ers aren't even close to meeting that, that's when you're going to start having worries about there being some sort of friction that might ultimately lead to, a trade request or, even just attention and negative energy going into training camp. That's where I'd really be concerned, is if the 49ers are at a point where the number is something that they just refuse to move off of. As of now, we haven't heard anything like that. So while it is in the realm of possibility, I wouldn't be too concerned about that just yet. Ultimately, the 49ers have shown that they're going to get these type of deals done around training camp. That's what they did for Kittle. That's what they did for Fred Warner. They want to reward players for showing up. They want to send a message that, hey, if you come ready to work and you come to training camp and you're ready to get going for the next season and do what you've been doing in years prior, they're going to take care of you for the most part. And I think that's kind of where this all lies right now. I just think it's something where, these negotiations take time. And especially if you're talking about a player that's as unique as Deebo Samuel, the way the wide receiver market's boomed in recent years, all these factors going into it, it makes sense why they're not just coming to a deal overnight. And I think that's where the issue lies. Hind is asking, is it all about guaranteed money? I would assume so, because ultimately, I think people get so caught up in average annual value when we talk about NFL contracts that the real, structure and the real, importance of an NFL contract is always going to be the practical guarantees and the guaranteed at signing, because the guaranteed at signing, the player's getting no matter what. And then the practical guarantees, they're more than likely going to get most, if not all of that. But there's plenty of guys that sign these massive deals where you look at the years and the total, and they don't come close to seeing any of that. The majority of NFL contracts won't be played out as signed, considering if they're not playing up to standards, odds are the team's going to either restructure and or cut, move the player. And if they're playing above expectation, the player's going to want to restructure and get more. So you very rarely see contracts actually played out to the full potential when we're talking about these star players, or to the full dollar amount of the initial agreed upon, offer. So yeah, that's kind of where I would assume it is we're at a point now where the 49ers are just, engaged in negotiation with the player. And I think that, all this fuss got made about Kyler Murray doing the same thing a couple of weeks ago. I think that the biggest difference here is that we haven't seen Deebo Samuel release, a statement through his agent or release any kind of outside noise. Realistically, the only thing people are talking about is the Instagram stuff. There's been no actual substance like we saw with Kyler Murray, where he literally had his representation put out this, odd statement. I still don't understand the point of it. Here we are a month later, and all the stuff's back on his Instagram. Like everything that Kyler Murray took down that people freaked out about, and we're like, oh my God, he took all the Cardinals stuff down. He doesn't want to play for the Cardinals anymore. It's all back up, and he's going to be there, and he's probably going to get paid by them. And it's just one of these things where I think as 49ers fans, get deeper into this offseason, and hopefully this resolves itself. It'll be something where people can look back on and be like, yeah, this was never going to be that big of an issue. I don't think that there's any way that Deebo Samuel doesn't get paid, is basically where I'm at right now. And I think the 49ers understand that they would benefit tremendously to get something done. And I think the fact that he is one of Kyle Shanahan's guys, and he was somebody who was handpicked by Kyle Shanahan, and who was really the first, wide receiver that Kyle fell in love with during the scouting process and had pan out and actually be successful. And he embodies so many of the things that this 49ers team wants to do. He's physical. He's tough after the catch, great release package, can be a downfield threat for Trey Lance. So I think the 49ers are going to ultimately play him, is my point. Like, that's where I'm at now. I think that the 49ers are ultimately going to find a way to get this done. I don't know the dollar amounts. I don't think he's going to end up being paid more than guys like, Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill, but I think he'll get a very healthy payday, which is much deserved. And I think that it'll come before this season starts. I don't think Samuel's going to get on the field again before he gets a good amount of guaranteed money, which I can't blame him for, especially the way he was utilized last season. I'm always going to be pro player. I think these guys put their bodies on the line every single day. And it's something where I can understand why people maybe get a little hesitant with guys getting big contracts and it doesn't work out and there's cap problems down the line. All that stuff can be sorted out. I'm not going to sit here and be upset at a player for looking out for their own best interests. And that's ultimately what I think Deebo Samuel is doing right now, as he's just, taking steps to make sure that he secures his own bag and his own brand is taken care of. And I don't think that that is selfish. I don't think that that's, people throw things around. Like, I've seen people call him like a diva and stuff this week. And I'm like, man, it's something I can't wrap my head around, right? Because, I hear all the cliche stuff too. Like, I don't root for the name on the back of the jersey. I root for the logo on the helmet and all that stuff. At the end of the day, these human beings that you swear you won't get attached to or root for individually are the product on the field. And if those human beings aren't taken care of, they're probably not going to produce on the field the way you'd like them to. So I've always thought it was kind of funny that there's this like narrative that like, oh, all of a sudden the guy wants to get paid and now they're a diva. Like, hey, if I go and I'm really good at my job and I'm picking up all the slack at my job, I'm going to want a pay raise. I'm going to want to be compensated for that. I think anybody in their right mind reasonably would want to do that. So these athletes are no different. And again, Deebo Samuel just is coming off a season where he did something that's never been done before. No wide receiver in the history of the sport has has over 1,300 reception yards in a season and rushed for over 300 yards in the same season. Nobody's ever done that ever in the history of the NFL. NFL's over 100 years old. Deebo Samuel is the first to do it. So I can understand why Deebo Samuel is at a point now where he wants to be compensated for his unique skill set and also be taken care of with guaranteed money. I think if the 49ers were to give him $55-60 million in guaranteed money, you can work out the average annual value, the cap hits, all that other stuff later. I think right now I would personally be willing to give Deebo Samuel that range of guaranteed money. I think he's earned it, and I just think he's way too important to this team. I think that realistically, people are always going to bring up DeForest Buckner, right? And they're going to say, well, DeForest Buckner was really important. DeForest Buckner got traded. If they traded Buckner, they'll trade anybody. This is my biggest thing, is that I think the 49ers had a ready-made replacement for DeForest Buckner in the sense that they knew that Eric Armstead was still there, and Eric Armstead could kick inside. Eric Armstead could do a lot of the things that Buckner did. Well, DeForest Buckner is a great player, and it's obviously a loss that they've felt at times. Eric Armstead's played as well. Like, I would argue better at times, but he's been at least as good as Buckner since both of those players separated, were no longer on the same defensive line. And as good as I think Brandon Ayuk is, and I think Juwan Jennings is, I don't see anybody that the 49ers have right now that can do the things that Deebo Samuel does. I don't really see anybody in the NFL that can do what Deebo Samuel does. I think he is such a unique skill set and such a transcendent talent, and having his combination of his abilities, his size, all that stuff for me is you take care of those players and you pay them. And I think right now it's just a matter of sorting out the details. I don't think this is a situation where the 49ers are going to allow it to get to a boiling point where somebody's requesting a trade or they are fielding offers. And hey, maybe if a team calls and they're offering, a bunch of, a couple first round picks or something like that, they're answering the phone and listening. But I'd be shocked if they were actively trying to move Deebo Samuel at this point, and it's something where they're like, hey, we're not going to pay him and we're going to just end up moving him. I don't see a way that they can do that. So that's kind of my thoughts on Deebo Samuel right now. For those of you guys who just joined, what's going on? I appreciate everybody I see in the chat who's in here hanging out. I hope you guys are all having a good Saturday. I'm going to get into a mock draft here, and we'll toy around with some different stuff. Maybe I'll try some. We can trade up. We can trade back, whatever. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts with the draft stuff because it's coming up. It is less than 3 weeks away. It will be April 28th in Las Vegas. And the 49ers obviously don't have the first round pick, but they'll be picking in the second round. They have 9 picks in this draft. So it'll be really fun to get into that. So we can touch on that. But yeah, just to wrap up on Deebo Samuel, at this point, if you ask me what my concern level is on a scale of like 0 to 10 of him leaving, it'd be like a 2.5 or a 3. I really don't. I mean, I think the possibilities out there, given the fact that we saw 2 of the better receivers in the league and Hill and Adams get moved this offseason. So I can't sit here and say 0, but I'm not sitting here overly concerned that there's this like burnt bridge and that Deebo Samuel won't want to play for the 49ers next season. So that's kind of where I'm at. Heinz asking AJ Brown, Deebo who gets the bag first. That's tough because they're all represented by the same agent, which is funny. Like that was an interesting fact when I learned that. So those negotiations have to be pretty tough right now, knowing each of your own clients wants to get paid more than the other and how you handle those negotiations. I think ultimately AJ Brown will get the most out of them. I think they're all really unique in what they're able to do, and they all are just superstar players in my opinion. But AJ Brown to me has been more consistent and has been the most complete receiver of the 3. He's the one who I wanted him the most when the Niners were picking at 32 or 34, wherever they were picking that year in 2019. But I think Deebo's obviously worked out well for them, and DK's been great in Seattle. But AJ Brown is really good. So I don't know who gets it first, but I will say I think AJ Brown ends up getting the most guaranteed money out of the 3 of them. So let's get into some draft stuff. I'll pull this up. I use the PFF simulator, and for any of you guys who toy around with mock drafts, I will tell you why. The PFF mock is updated like daily, it feels like. They take into account where guys are going within mocks, they adjust rankings. So you get a little bit more of an accurate board when you're going through. I think with PFN, for whatever reason, they might not update their board as often. They might not update their system as often. You have guys that are going to probably be gone in the first 45 picks, and they're going at like pick 130, 140. So you can do a mock draft on PFN that looks really, really good, but the odds of it being anywhere realistic or close to what's actually going to happen are very slim. And that's just why I tend to use the PFF one. So for anybody who's toying around with mock drafts, if you're just goofing around and want to have fun, you can use whatever. It doesn't matter. But if you want it to be accurate and you want it to be close to what probably ends up happening when draft day actually rolls around, I highly suggest the PFF one. Plus the trading, all that stuff's a lot easier too. My bad. I apologize. My computer always kicks me off right here. I don't know why. It always does that. But I'm back. We're cooking. So I got the 1 second here. I got to share the screen. I got the mock draft tool pulled up here. So we'll go ahead and get into this. I hope everybody can see the screen okay. And I'll go ahead and start it. So for the first one, I'm not going to do any trades. I'm just going to toy around and see where guys fall. We can talk about a couple of these prospects really quick. I'll let you guys know some people who I like. Alvaro's asking, do you think we'd trade up? So at 61, I am not sure if they're going to trade up off that pick. They will trade up a couple times, I believe. Like there's no chance that they're going to spend all 9 picks, in my opinion, especially considering how many they have on the back end of day 3. So I expect them to move around a couple times. Like they will trade up eventually, if not, 2 or 3 times. I just don't know that it's going to be that first pick, Alvaro. So maybe I wouldn't put it past them, and especially, hey, if they can find somebody that's willing to take someone, someone's willing to, I think they pick it 105 and like 134. If somebody's interested in one of those picks, maybe they can jump up 10 spots, 5 spots, 15 spots, somewhere in that range without having to give up 93 as well. Because I'm not going to lie, I did a mock last night. It was really funny, actually. I can toy around with it. I'll show you guys. I traded every single draft pick that the 49ers had this year with Kansas City for 29, and then I took Boye Mafe at 29. So I basically did what Mike Ditka did with Ricky Williams when he was with the Saints, and he basically traded an entire year's worth of draft picks to move up to take Ricky Williams. I did the same thing to get Boye Mafe. And as much as I was joking, like if the Niners didn't have like needs and depth to fill, like I wouldn't think it's the worst strategy in the world. If you really identify a player, and I think Boye Mafe is that good, why not, dude? Like those picks later, you can figure it out with undrafted free agents and bank on your mid-round picks next year. Like it was kind of a joke, but the more and more I thought about it, I'm like, man, honestly, if you really found a guy that you really like, I couldn't fault a team for giving up 5 or 6 draft picks to move up and get him. Like it's probably not the best business long term, but if you can survive one draft of doing that and you get a transcendent generational player out of it, I would be all for it. So it's not gonna happen. Just throwing it out there. I thought it was kind of fun. So let's go to the board. Let's see who's on here. We got Brian Samoa. 49ers don't need a linebacker. They have 3 really good starting linebackers. They have a 4th really good linebacker coming off the bench, and Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles too. Sure, they could add one for depth and maybe a special teams guy later on, but they also have Oren Burks, who's probably the 5th linebacker anyway. I don't see it as a need. Kingsley Enagbare is a guy who I've been watching a ton of. I was watching some of his tape last night against Tennessee and I want to say East Carolina is another guy that I was watching. I like him. Abraham Lucas is another interesting player. He's a tackle who's very athletic. Maybe the 49ers have him start out in kind of a developmental role. They kind of redshirt him in a similar way to Aaron Banks was last offseason. And if Mike McGlinchey isn't healthy and fully recovered by the time next season rolls around and he's due to get paid again, you can move on and transition. Or if Mike McGlinchey comes back, he's healthy and he plays like a stud and he wants a big contract extension, you then have a cheaper option in-house. So I think that's interesting. He's definitely one of the guys I look at if you're looking at a tackle there. Another player is Kirby Joseph. Kirby Joseph has really good length, pretty good. People always throw around the ball hawking word. They want a ball hawking safety for the 49ers. I'm not a huge fan of that because I think a lot of that is dependent on luck and circumstance. But if we are throwing it around, Kirby Joseph is definitely somebody who fits that mold. Dylan Parham is another guy who I like, the guard here from Memphis. He's somebody who I thought had a great build, moved really well, would probably project pretty well into the 49ers scheme. So I want to take a player I haven't taken yet. So for the sake of that, I've done mocks with Enagbare and I've done mocks with Pascal. I usually go edge here. I am going to take a tackle here. I'm going to take Abraham Lucas at 61 and get the 49ers a right tackle of the future who I think could slot in and, again, be extremely athletic, be a really good player for them. So now we're sitting here and we are at 93. There still are some good prospects on the board. Niners could use a safety. They could use a corner. They could use a center. So I'm kind of thinking I might actually cheat and trade up on this draft because I am thinking that there is a player here who I really like, who I don't want to pass on. So I'm going to take Nick Cross here, the safety from Maryland. Nick Cross is phenomenal. He is a player who I think has great range. He is 4.3 speed. I think he ran in the 4.4s at the combine, but he looks like to me like a guy who has 4.3 speed. Like to me, he looks like somebody that has that kind of burst on the field. I think he officially ran in the 4.4s, if I'm recalling correctly, but he looks like a 4.3 guy to me. So just to clarify, I don't want to be misleading anybody. Really good north to south, great range, can play single high if they spin Jimmy Ward down and they have him near the line of scrimmage. So I like Nick Cross a lot. I think he's a really good player. So with the first two picks, you take, Abraham Lucas and you get that tackle of the future. And then you take Nick Cross, who, we'll see how it goes, but he's somebody who potentially could start from day one, might need a little bit of time to develop, but he's somebody who I think is a really good player. So now we're at 105, and now is when it gets interesting. So I don't have to cheat and trade up because the player I wanted is still here. So I'm going to take Luke Fortner out of Kentucky. And the reason why I'm going to take Luke Fortner out of Kentucky is because I think that he can not only play center, he can play either of the guard spots. He's played all three interior offensive line positions at a very high level in a very tough conference in the SEC. So with Fortner, I think you have the flexibility of maybe that is your center of the future. Maybe he projects better at right guard. Maybe next year Daniel Brunskill gets paid somewhere. Maybe you keep Banks at right guard and you have Fortner play left guard. Like it just opens up the possibilities. I think he's a really, really good player, but I think the fact that he could potentially play any of the three positions on the offensive line makes this a much more appealing pick to me. I really like Donovan West as well. He got picked a few slots ahead of that. He was taken. So I might take Fortner over West based on the versatility if they're both there, but with West gone for sure, I'm definitely taking Fortner. So now we're at 134. We've taken a tackle, we've taken a center, and we have taken a safety. So I still think the 49ers have a need at corner. I think that obviously the Travarius Ward signing was really big. I think Emmanuel Mosley's good. I think Ambry Thomas has nice traits and can end up being a good player. I think Deommodore Lenoir showed flashes. I personally really want a cornerback. I want somebody that's going to be able to step in and potentially play that slot corner role that's now vacant with K'Wan Williams gone. So I want a player that's comfortable in that nickel position, who's comfortable operating in space. And there's a name right there, second from the top, who stands out that can do that. Cordell Flott out of LSU is a really, really solid nickel corner who's been their starting slot corner for the last 2 seasons. Somebody that's looked really good in space, good within the box. His build kind of throws some people off. He doesn't look the biggest. He's 6'1", 175 pounds. A lot of people think he's too small. I think that he is a really, really intriguing prospect because he can also kick outside. Jay's saying that, E-Man's going to get paid next year, meaning Emmanuel Mosley. So it would give you insurance where maybe he could play the slot, maybe he could play outside. You have that versatility to move him back and forth. And if he really does need to put on a little bit of weight rooms exist for a reason. These guys have sports science is as evolved as it's ever been. If you need to tack on 10 pounds of muscle, it's really not the tallest ask. But I think he has a lot of the ability that is much harder to teach than somebody just putting on weight. So I'm going to take Cordell Flott, the corner out of LSU. And The next pick for the 49ers is 172. So I personally don't think it's a huge deal. I think that he played much bigger than his size. BSE saying he's got to get that weight up. Jago Craze is saying that he weight is not a problem. BSE saying to watch on LSU, he struggles to get guys down. In the tape I've seen, I don't see it transitioning and being that much of a problem, to be honest. There were a couple plays, like I watched Ole Miss versus them in 2020. There were a couple plays where Elijah Moore kind of put him on his back in the run game is the best way I can put it. Like he got worked when he was going up against a run block, trying to shed a run block. But again, I like the coverage ability. I think the rest of that stuff can get figured out. I think he can add weight, and I think that he, at that spot especially, is a really good value. So now we're picking at 172, right? I still think the 49ers need to get a tight end. I know a lot of people wanted the tight end out of SMU there. I know BSC did. I didn't take Calcaterra. I obviously took the corner. But looking here, there's a couple guys I really like. I'm going to go Derek Deese here just because I think that he is somebody that offers a pretty good floor. I think he can be a tight end 2 or 3 in the NFL. Like I see him projecting into that nicely. But I think he's somebody who needs that ability and time to develop and doesn't need to step in and make a huge impact year 1 or even year 2. And I think with the 49ers already having George Kittle, obviously, they have Charlie Warner, they have Ross Dwelley. He's somebody that could come in and be that 4th tight end. They've shown a willingness to carry 4 tight ends in the past. I think they could do it again. Even if they don't, I think Derek Deese is somebody that maybe gives you more upside than you're getting from a Charlie Warner or from a Ross Dwelley. So the 49ers might be content with the tight end room they have now. I personally think that it could stand to upgrade a little bit. So I took Derek Deese with that pick. And those of you who remember, his dad played offensive line for the 49ers for a better part of a decade, was an All-Pro, won that last Super Bowl in 1994 with them. So you get kind of a cool story too, where you get this, legacy, former 49er, his son's now playing for the team, local guy from San Jose State. BSE saying he has good hands. I completely agree. He's somebody, again, who I think could just be a reliable target. And I think he has a little bit more athleticism because I think Ross Dwelley has really good hands too. I just think Deese is a little bit better athlete. And again, when you're sitting there and you're picking on the back end around 5 on day 3, you can kind of take some swings at some players like that. And, you're filling for depth at that point. You're not looking for your next superstar starter level player. Not every year is going to have a George Kittle just sitting in the 5th round waiting to get picked. So I take Deese with that pick, feeling really good about insulating the tight end room and adding a little bit more athleticism and ceiling behind what is currently sitting there behind George Kittle right now. So that brings us to 187. Now, this is where it gets interesting because I still think that there are some needs elsewhere. And I think like a guy like Cordell Volson is really intriguing as well. But I would like to see the 49ers add a running back that has really good burst. I want to see them add a running back that has good speed, either really good speed or really, really, really good vision. And I think right now you could argue that between guys like Jeff Wilson and Mitchell and Sermon, maybe if he pans out, you have enough to bank on with vision. What you don't have is speed. So with us already taking Abraham Lucas, I would look at Cordell Volson pretty hard right here. But with us already taking Abraham Lucas, I'm going to pass on the tackle here and instead take a running back. I'm going to take Devontae Price out of FIU, who ran in the 4.3s at the combine, looked really explosive doing so, ran tall when he did carry the ball, was somebody that was not easy to bring down for how fast he is. I understand people might not be excited with running backs. They want Shanahan and that offense to sign undrafted free agents every year. They don't want to draft them. To me, the speed's there. The physical ability's there. He's 6'1". He's got a pretty good frame to him as well. Again, not somebody that's just going to go down easily. I like that, and I think that he could end up being a viable player for that. Tony's saying Ezra Gray has all of those things, and if you guys didn't know, Tony's doing a space with Ezra Gray, who's a running back out of South Alabama, I believe. I apologize if I got the school wrong. It's very hectic this time of year watching all these guys. So Tony's hosting a space. If you guys want to watch that, if you're on Twitter, I'll share it and make sure everybody can see it. But that should be pretty fun. You can ask some questions to a draft prospect and hear his thoughts as he goes through the draft process. So we're sitting here at, what is this, 220, I believe? Yeah, 220. So the Niners pick at 220, 221, and 262. Top players left on the board are two punters. 3 out of the top 4 are punters. So Jason Aponte is weeping somewhere. As much as I think Matt Ariaza would be a great ad, I don't see the 49ers really cutting ties with Mitch Wisnowski. Ariaza was in Indy booting 80-yard just nukes off his foot, just bombing the ball downfield. I think he's going to be as exciting of a punter as you could possibly have. Punting is not very exciting. So I think he's a guy that's intriguing for teams. Like if the Niners had a need, I would take him here without question. I think in the 6th round, it's great value. They don't. So again, I'm looking more so at like where do the 49ers have a spot that I can plug in a guy who can be a depth piece, who can be a rotational player, who can be somebody that might push for a starting spot. I am looking here at CJ Wright out of Georgia Southern. He's a guy who I've mocked a couple times, who I like, comes from a smaller school, but had pretty consistent production as both a run defender and a pass rusher. I think that while it's not a lock by any means that he could make that final 53, it's a very deep roster at the defensive line right now. They have some good players on the interior. I think he's somebody that would have the ability to contribute, has a very similar build in the sense that he's not the biggest guy, like kind of how DJ Jones was. Both are 6 feet tall. So he has the ability to get leverage from a lower spot than a lot of guys who do play on the defensive interior. So I do like CJ Wright a lot. He's somebody who I think could be a good player in the league. So now it's at the point where, again, you're drafting for, you're drafting for projection at this point, and you're drafting for high ceiling. Like at this point, we're sitting here at the end of round 6. Like the odds that one of these guys ends up even starting or having like a depth role at this point are probably pretty slim. So I'm going to take somebody who I think has good physical upside and just needs to kind of put the whole package together. And that to me is Jack Jones, cornerback out of Arizona State. He's somebody who I think if they can work with and get the most out of would be a viable player for them. And I'm of the thinking that if you can draft as many players as possible at a certain position, whether we're talking receiver, edge, corner, like those really, really important positions, that to me is where I'm going to want to invest the majority of my picks, just because I think that you're playing a numbers game at that point, right? Like, yeah, we can all scout and say a guy looks really good, but the more and more players you add, the more your chances increase of hitting on one of those guys. So that to me is why I'm going to load up on corners. I would honestly take 5 corners in this draft if I could, or I would take 5 receivers or edge rushers if I was building a team that way, because I think ultimately you can never have too many good players like that. And at the end of the day, there's always going to be a team that's willing to trade for a good corner or willing to trade for a good edge rusher or a good receiver. So that's kind of my thinking with that. So the last pick we have here is Mr. Irrelevant, right? It's 262. So where do the 49ers go with this? Again, at this point, like I would probably have traded these picks if I was the 49ers. I would have moved off. I don't want to pick at 262. I don't really care. So I'm going to have some fun with this last pick. And see if maybe there's, someone here that I like that can maybe have a chance at making an impact down the road. So I'm going to take Connor Hayward out of Michigan State. And Connor Hayward is pretty much, a tweener, as somebody who's between a tight end and a fullback. He's somebody who's a bit undersized for the tight end position, a bit oversized for the fullback position, running back position, whatever you want to call it. And you take a swing here, and maybe they end up being somebody who's a succession plan for Kyle Juszczyk down the line. I know they have Josh Hawkett already, but maybe he gets signed. Somebody else sees the potential. A third of the league is running the Shanahan offense, so I think the fullback position is getting more important than it has been in recent years. So you take a guy in Connor Hayward who might be able to do a little bit of both, kind of a gadget player. Jay's saying tight back. Yeah, we can invent a new position for him. So I totally agree. That is kind of where I'm at with that draft. So I don't know what you guys think about that. I will pull up the page if I can here. I don't know where it went down to. Give me 1 second. I'll see if I can pull it up. But I can run through the picks with you. I took Abraham Lucas first. We took Nick Cross second. We took Luke Fortner third. We took Cordell Flott. Then we took Derek Deese. We took the tight end out of San Jose State. We took Devonta Price, the running back out of Florida International, and then we took CJ Wright, Jack Jones, and then Connor Hayward to close it off. My apologies. My screen, I have to get something's wrong with my laptop. My Windows just like close randomly. Might be haunted or something. I have no idea. It happens all the time. So I might not be able to pull it back up. But that's kind of where I'm at with my mock. I don't know what anybody else thinks of it. If you guys have any thoughts or where you'd go with it, we could absolutely talk about that. Again, I just was kind of trying to get on here, do a quick mock, talk a little bit about what's going on with my line of thinking, why I would pick certain players and whatnot. So that's kind of where I was at with that. I don't know if you guys want, we can maybe do one where we try trading up or down or something like that. The tool's a little wonky with the PFF thing. Like when you trade up, you have to give up like way more than is realistic for it to go through. So it does kind of skew things a little bit. If the 49ers see a safety that they really like it, in the low 40s, high 30s, maybe they trade a pretty big haul to move up. If there's an edge guy that's falling that they really, really like, maybe they do that. I just think moving from 61 to that range, when you're moving up 20 some odd picks, like that's a really, really hard proposition at that early stage of the draft, knowing how many quality players might be there in the back end. So I think they might do that. I might toy around with that a little bit. Maybe I'll do a separate stream for that. And we could do, trade ups, stuff like that. But I think for now, like their trade ups will probably come, like if they're sitting at 93 and there's a player they really like that's falling, like if they really see a safety like Nick Cross, or there's like a guard, like they like Cole Strange or something like that, I could see them moving up from like 93 to, the late 70s, early 80s or something like that. Tony saying the trade that I've been loving is 61 and 76 for 100 with Baltimore. Yeah, that would be a good value in my opinion. You move back 15 spots, but you still come away with a top 100 pick. Then you're picking at 93, 100, and 105, and you could hit on three pretty good. You have to hit on three chances to get a really good player. The odds of you hitting on all three of them are very slim, if not impossible. But you set yourself up in a much better position, and that's kind of where I'm at with doing these mocks. Is I always try to stick to my own philosophies when I like to discuss roster building and stuff like that, but trading back wouldn't be the worst thing. Like I did a mock the other night where I traded, let me see how many, I'll pull it up actually. I traded back like 5 times, I think. Yeah, I traded back 5 times before I picked, I believe. It was 4 or 5. So you can build a boatload of picks between like 80 and 150 where there is a ton of talent in the draft, and sure, you're missing on some guys that are probably going to be more highly touted prospects that are going to go sooner, but you're also increasing your chances, that you might end up with an impact player down the line because there's so many. So Justin's asking, is there any way they trade up if Thibodeau falls? No, dude, I don't think there's any chance he falls out of the top like 10, maybe like I don't know why a team would let him get past the top 15. I'll put it to you like that. I don't know why a team would let him get out of the top 5 or the top 10, but there's like absolutely no way I can rationalize to myself that he gets out of that. This is just what I heard. I heard that there were some teams that were a little put off by his overconfidence and his, attitude, for lack of a better phrasing. But I also think that if we're punishing physically gifted athletes for being extremely confident in their physical abilities, like what the hell are we doing here, man? Like it's professional sports. Like I'd hope the guy that I'm spending a top 5 draft pick on thinks they're really good and knows they're really good. And we've seen nothing or heard nothing that would indicate that his work ethic isn't there and he's not somebody that's willing to put in the time. So I don't know if teams are just going to overthink it. I've been saying for a couple months now that it feels like this is going to be a similar situation to Micah Parsons last year, where you have a really, really solid prospect who's been pretty recognized as one of the top prospects in the class for some time, and teams just overthink that, and outsmart themselves. I think that's much more likely with Thibodeau. I don't think there's any chance. Like the guys that I'm looking at that I'm not counting on in the slightest, but might be worth trading up if they fall, again, is like if Boye Mafe, if teams aren't sold that he hasn't had the production, they're not sold on the athletic ability and all that, maybe he slides a little bit. I think Arnold Ebiketie should be a just no-brainer first-round pick, but if he's a guy who falls a little bit, maybe they can jump up for him. I just think that these guys like Thibodeau and Trayvon Walker and Hutchinson and probably even Jermaine Johnson too out of Florida State, like they're just going to go so much sooner that it's just not realistic. Like unless there's a player trade involved where the Niners do end up moving a pretty notable player, I don't see how there's any way they get close to any of these guys. And yeah, it's a bummer. There's a lot of good players that are there at the top. I'll be honest with you though, this is one of the few years where I think picking at 10 and picking at 5 isn't like this huge gap or this huge difference where it's like this franchise altering pick is going at 5, but at 10 you're left with nothing. I think that there's a lot of very similar talent at the top end of the first round, if that makes sense. And I think that that's something where if you're not going to have a first round pick or an early first round pick, this is a really good year to not have it, because I think there are still so many good players later in the draft, where a lot of years it's the reverse. It's very top heavy. You want to have that pick in the top 15, top 20. I don't feel like that is the case. BSE saying if anybody falls, it'd be Ajabo, meaning David Ajabo, who unfortunately ruptured his Achilles at his pro day. I agree. I think Ajabo is somebody, man, if he can restore his physical ability, because I'll be honest with you, those Achilles injuries always make me a bit worried when we're talking about a player whose burst is so vital to their success, and their burst is what makes them such a different level of athlete. I still think Ajabo could return and be a really good player, but it's like, is a team going to feel comfortable taking him in the top 25, knowing he's going to miss the majority, if not all, of his rookie season, and knowing that there's a chance he never gets that burst back? But if he does and he were to slide, he's somebody like, 49ers fans really want to replace that production they were getting from Dee Ford for so long, right? Like they want that speed guy with dip and bend off the edge. Like to me, out of all the prospects who are realistic for the 49ers in this draft, I don't even say realistic, just out of the majority of them, like it's Ajabo, and like I like Jermaine Johnson a lot too, but Ajabo really does fit that mold to me of what people are looking for from that role opposite Nick Bosa. So I'm there with you. Alvaro has a good point too. If the Florida quarterback is there, we should trade up. I'm assuming you're talking about Kaiir Elam. I don't know if Tony's still watching. Tony had Kaiir Elam as like his 6th best corner in the class or something. I'm new to YouTube and I don't know how to like put you on timeout in the chat, but I would if I did, because that's just like blasphemous, dude. I cannot believe that you watched Kaiir Elam and you thought he was the 6th best corner in the class. So having said that, with all due respect to Tony, if NFL GMs are watching that and they feel like he's the 6th best corner and he's still sitting there at 35, 40, 45, absolutely no brainer. The 49ers should trade up. There's zero doubt in my mind that that would be a good pick. Even having Mosley and having Ward, Elam is a guy to me that he could one day end up looking back on this being the best corner in this class. He's that good to me, and he'd be so good in the 49ers scheme. I thought that he looked really good in zone coverage at Florida. He has a good build. He's physical. He's somebody that can tackle. Really, really good in coverage against Jameson Williams and John Mechie in the Alabama game. That's the first really extensive look I had at him, and I was blown away. I had no idea who he was, to be honest. I'm like, who's this guy from Florida, number 5? And everybody's like, dude, he's been like a highly touted prospect for years. And I'm like, well, I watch Pac-12 football, man. I don't get the chance to watch every SEC game. So I hadn't really paid attention to him, and I was extremely impressed. Very easily, Tony, I can rank him above 5, just like I can rank Derek Stingley above Trent McDuffie, man. Again, I'm a Pac-12 guy. I will always give flowers to the Pac-12, even when they probably don't deserve it. There's no way I would ever have Trent McDuffie over Derek Stingley. We can agree. I'm not saying my opinion is right and yours is wrong. I'm just saying that I would take Derek Stingley and Kaiir Elam over Trent McDuffie every single time. I think that Kaiir Elam could be in that discussion. Like, I'd take Stingley over everybody too. Like, let's be honest. Like, I think that at this point, we have to acknowledge that sometimes there's overthinking, right? And sometimes just like, this mindset that, just because this player didn't match their extremely high level of play, like a guy like Stingley had, that they're like regressing or they're not going to be good anymore. I definitely would take Stingley, and I would take Stingley over Sauce Gardner. I'd take him over everybody in this class. I'd take Elam up there with those guys as well, to be honest. Like, I think Sauce is going to end up being a good player. I think that there's some good corners in this class. But again, if I'm taking a corner that high, they're going to have some sort of physical ability that's really selling me. And that's where I like Elam. Alvaro, my guy, Pac-12 top-tier football. Conference of Champions, dude. And I hate to say this because I'm a Cal Bears fan. I'm going to end up being some jerk on my couch sitting here like cheering for the Pac-12 when in actuality I'm just having to like cheer for USC because they're going to be the only team that has a chance of making the playoff. Maybe Oregon too. Oregon and USC are like the only 2 teams that have a realistic shot at making the playoffs in the distant future. So I hate that that's what it's going to come to, but I would much rather watch USC or Oregon win a title than keep watching Clemson and Alabama and Ohio State and these teams in the title every single year. Like, it gets so old, man. Congratulations to Georgia. It was nice to see a different team win and see Georgia, do it. But I'm so over it, man. And again, I understand it, people don't really care about Pac-12 football, and the West Coast isn't the same as the South and the East Coast and the Midwest when it comes to being into football and all that. I remember a time when USC dominated the college football landscape. And even though I'm a Cal Bears fan, like it'd be nice to see the Pac-12 taken seriously again. So shout out to you. Tony swears that Trent McDuffie is underrated and that I'll see it maybe. I don't know, man. Maybe I will. I haven't yet. I don't know. Justin's asking where I think Lewis Cine goes. I don't know what team he goes to, but I think he goes in the top 25 picks or so. I think he's a really good safety. I think there's teams that might feel like he's up there, even with Kyle Hamilton. I think that that's something where it's like the name's been permeated for so long that we're like in this trance where it's like Kyle Hamilton is the best player in this draft maybe, and he's by far the best safety. I would not be surprised in the slightest if there are a handful of NFL teams out there who think that Lewis Cine is a better safety than Kyle Hamilton and thinks that he is the best safety in this class. So BSC is pointing out another guy that hasn't gotten enough love. Andrew Booth out of Clemson is another guy who's kind of flown under the radar. Clemson had a disastrous season. They were like the 2021 Los Angeles Lakers of college football, where they come in as these, highly touted favorite team, and then they just have this like Titanic of a season where it's just like, or disastrous. Sorry, like the Titanic, where it's just like this, everything's going wrong, and all of a sudden you're just stuck, right? So I think that it's not what they had envisioned, but it's something that they, they won 10 games, but come on, man, like it's not the season they would hope for. I don't even remember what bowl game they played in, right? Like I just. It was a bad season, right? Again, it was like they had this disastrous season where everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. So I think that he's a guy who hasn't gotten enough credit either. So I definitely agree there. Let's see. I got a couple other questions in here. If we don't make any moves. I really like Josh Paschal, man. I know a lot of people aren't super high on him. I think he's going to be a good player. I think the floor he offers as a run defender is super strong. I think he's somebody who, has good ability as a high floor 3-down end for the 49ers. So that's definitely where I'm kind of at with that. I think that that's, the guy I like the most. I do like Emerson, the cornerback out of Mississippi State too. He's somebody who might still be there in that range. I think a lot of the top corners will be gone by then. I do like Enagbare too. I think he's a good player. I'm trying to think who else is going to be in that range. It's kind of hard to project. Those are the guys that I've been kind of mocking the most in that area. Kirby Joseph's an interesting player too. If they really like Kirby Joseph, I'll be honest, I'd take Nick Cross at 61 probably and feel pretty good about it. So, that's kind of where I'm at with that. I apologize. Hey there. Hey, I'll be honest with you, man. I got a lot of friends who are Lakers fans, and they gave me a really hard time as a Warriors fan after that whole play-in game last year. So I'll be honest. I have empathy for you, but for those that gave me a hard time, I am laughing, and I told them I would get the last laugh, and here we are a year later. How funny how things work out. But I hope you guys figure it out, man. Basketball's more fun when the Lakers are good, so I hope you guys figure it out. I won't rub it in too much. Let's see. Bryant saying Kobe Bryant would be a good fit for the 49ers, talking about Kobe Bryant, the corner out of Cincinnati. I think he's somebody that could be there. And I definitely feel pretty good about that. At least once a stream, that's going to happen, man. At least once a stream. Tony saying I should get Leon O'Neal on here for an interview so we can talk about your safety rankings. He cooked you. If you guys don't know, Tony got cooked on Twitter by Leon O'Neal, the safety prospect out of Texas A&M. I thought it was hilarious. Tony posted his rankings, and he had Leon O'Neal much lower than I would have. And he got cooked. And it was like, I felt like, that scene in The Godfather where it's like, look how they massacred my boy. Like, that's how I felt watching Tony just get absolutely cooked on the timeline by Leon O'Neal. So that would be fun. Maybe I'll talk to him about that, and I'll see if he's interested in coming on, and we can just have a kind of a roast session cookie. Maybe I'll get Lamont on here too. We'll just have like the roast of Tony Rangini on the channel. Alvaro's asking how I feel about the Western Kentucky edge. I think you're talking about D'Angelo Malone. That's what I'm going to assume it's about. I think that he's a really good player. And I think he's somebody where the athletics score is there. The athletic testing looked pretty good. The physical ability looked good. He might be a little bit raw, but he's somebody who I think could profile pretty well into a rotational pass rusher who just might need a little bit of time to develop. He's somebody who probably would be there at 93, 105, maybe 105, probably 93, somewhere in that range is where I see him mocked the most. I like him a lot. I know Brad Graham loves him. I assume almost anybody watching this knows Brad Graham of the SF Niners. When we were in Indy, D'Angelo Malone was like his favorite prospect, and that was the guy that he was, the most excited about outside of the offensive line guys. He asked me, I went and asked a couple things to get some insight for Brad on him. I will tell you guys this. At the time, at the Combine, the team that had showed the most interest in D'Angelo Malone was actually the Seattle Seahawks. So that is kind of interesting because they still do run a pretty similar defensive shell to what the 49ers are running. So they definitely felt like he was somebody that could transition into a role for their own defense. So I wonder if the 49ers had some interest as well. Justin saying, would I take a flyer on Smoke Monday at 187 if he was there? I would, just for the name, dude, to be honest. I remember when I first heard his name come up during this like evaluation process, and I heard the name Smoke Monday, and I'm like, oh my God, dude, like that is a football name. Like that is somebody I would love to see on my football team. And, in terms of serious analysis, like, yes, I would, but like on a joking note too, like I absolutely would, just for the, like, that's such a good name, dude. Could you imagine having a Smoke Monday jersey? Like that would be like fantastic. So I would probably do it. Tony's saying Nick Cross over Brian Cook. Yes, I would take Nick Cross over Brian Cook. I think Nick Cross his range is insane, dude. And that's so big for me, especially in the modern NFL. And especially because it seems like DeMeco Ryans is a little bit more determined to run a little bit more too high, a little bit more cover two, have the flexibility to spin Jimmy Ward down and have somebody take the deep third as the single high. I would be much more comfortable with Nick Cross at this point, personally. I have to watch more Brian Cook. I'll be honest. I haven't watched as much of him as I've watched. But that is where I'm at kind of with Nick Cross. Hey, there's asking who this player is. Dante Hall, the human joystick. For those of you who remember, in my opinion, the greatest returner of all time. I know Devin Hester's up there for a lot of people, but for me, Dante Hall was that guy. I love the memorabilia that I've been able to collect. The stuff to me means a lot. And this little wall I have behind me here, I have Michael Vick, who's one of my favorite players of all time. I got Ricky Williams behind me, Patrick Willis up here. So it's kind of just a collection. It's a random collection of players, but it's just players who I grew up that I really liked when I was growing up and getting into the sport of football, and some of the players who had a big influence on me falling in love with this game. So yeah, that's why I have Dante Hall there. A lot of people think it's like Dwayne Bowe when they first see it, but no, it's the human joystick himself. See his accent's obviously Dwayne Bowe. The Ricky Williams one's my favorite one. I'm not gonna lie, dude. That one, I'm so happy I was able to find that. He was one of my favorite players of all time. He's just an awesome human being too. If you see what Ricky Williams is doing now in retirement and after it, just when he does interviews and stuff, I'm a big fan of Ricky Williams. So that's fair. We're talking about Enagbare and Paschal from Tennessee. There might not be like a significantly higher ceiling when we're talking about their pass rushing ability, but we also don't know that. And I also think both of them are athletic enough that they can, get, especially Paschal. I think Paschal's a better athlete, to be honest. I will be honest with you, after watching a little bit more Enagbare last night, I kind of was like, there were times where it felt like when he didn't win off his initial move, he didn't improvise and adapt as much as I'd like. Like, it didn't feel like he had a deep bag when that initial get off wasn't there. So I'm more inclined to take Paschal with that pick, to be honest with you, just because, again, even if he just provides a high floor as a really good run defender, there's value in that. And I think that that's something that they need to look at, because realistically, you have Samson Ebukam under contract for this season. Two things are going to happen. Either Samson Ebukam doesn't play that great, he regresses, those sack numbers disappear, the pressure numbers disappear, it just doesn't work out. They probably don't keep him. Or he continues to get better, he continues to improve. He had 7 sacks in his last 8 games. And they were he had a sack in 7 of the last 8 games. I think he had multiple sacks in 1 or 2 of those games. So he's somebody who got better the more comfortable he got in that role. There's a very realistic scenario where Samson Ebukam plays even better this season and prices himself out of the 49ers future as somebody that the 49ers might not feel comfortable retaining at a certain number. So then you have a guy that you can plug and play that's on a rookie deal for the next 3 years after that in Pascal to me. So that's kind of where my thinking is at with that. Let's see where else. They're asking, would I sit at 61, move up or down? It all depends how the board goes. If there's a player that I really, really like, I'm moving up. If there's players that I'm kind of just indifferent on, I would trade back. I think regardless, they should do one of the two because the value of just sitting at 61 isn't great, in my opinion. If you jump up 10 slots, you can get a really, really good player. If you move back, you can get extra picks. If you move back from 61 to say, I think it was 76, Tony was saying he went to, I don't think it's a huge loss to go between those 15 spots. Like there's not such a gap in those 15 picks where I'm like, man, the 49ers are really going to be missing out if they go back 15 spots and don't get a guy in that range. So I would do either depending on the board. And it really just depends. Like I said, if there's a player that's there that I really, really covet, I would probably move up. But if there's guys that, if all those guys are gone by pick 45 or 50, because realistically, the Niners aren't going to move up more than 16 spots, in my opinion. I could be wrong. I don't see them really moving up higher than that. So to me, it really is just kind of dependent on how the board shakes out. But if I had to pick one or the other, I would say trade down just to get more picks because I think there's enough players that you can get on the back end. BSE is saying Seahawks took Bruce Irvin in the first round. He was obviously out of West Virginia. He has a similar profile to D'Angelo Malone out of Western Kentucky. And Bruce Irvin was a big part of those Legion of Boom defenses and that Seattle Super Bowl run. He's somebody who I think doesn't get the credit he deserves. Him and Cliff Averill both were Michael Bennett too. Like the defensive line was so good and that secondary and then Bobby Wagner and all these guys get all this shine. Deservedly so. They were really, really good players. But that Seattle defensive line was really good when they had Bennett and Averill and Bruce Irvin rushing the passer. So that's a so annoying that this keeps happening. Let's see. Brian Cook was as fast as anyone on the Cincy defense, versatile to play anywhere. Tony says best run fitter in the draft and a damn good tackler. I don't know. I'd have to look at that. And I'll be honest with you too. I'm all for scouting the helmet and not or the player, not the helmet. Sorry, and scouting the individuals. To me, Cincinnati, like I wasn't really impressed with the majority of the games they played. Like the opponents they were playing. I thought that most of the defense looked pretty good against Alabama. But like to me too, like I think we've seen that a lot, and especially when we're talking about like defense, like I think offense transitions a little bit better. Like you can see guys, their release package, things like that translate a little bit better if we're talking about lesser competition. But when you're talking about defensive backs, like at times, like I'm not like super sold on taking a guy like that hasn't gone up against top flight competition week in and week out. I don't think it's a necessity. I don't think it's an absolute and you have to do it. I just would personally tend to shy away from that. And even like I said, like a guy like Nick Cross, the athletes you're playing in the Big Ten are much different than the schedule that Cincinnati is playing in the American Conference. And that's just kind of where I'm at with it. I think that a lot of times that looks like much better than they ultimately are because they are going up against lesser competition. And again, it's not always. There are some really good players that come out of smaller schools. Obviously, the 49ers franchise quarterback is an FCS guy from North Dakota State. So it's not a absolute rule. It's just kind of, that's where I'm not like a lot of those guys on the Cincinnati defense look good. What are the odds that they all go to the NFL? They all pan out. Like that's kind of where I'm at with it. Like at a certain point, I'm much more comfortable taking the player that stood out in a tougher conference on a team like Maryland, where sure, maybe they don't have the team success that Cincinnati had, but you can see the individual ability of a guy like Nick Cross. And that's just kind of where I'm at. Hein is saying Dameon Pierce is Frank Gore. That's tough. That's a tough bar to live up to for Mr. Pierce. I know Frank Gore. That's another thing. I don't know if you guys want to talk about it at all, but I know earlier this week there was some discussion about Frank Gore and the Hall of Fame and all that. It's a no-brainer for me. Like I think Frank Gore is a Hall of Famer. I think he exemplifies everything that the Hall of Fame stands for. He's third all-time on the all-time rushing list. That longevity. The way he played the game of football, he has the statistics, but he also has the intangibles that really are the mission statement of the Hall of Fame is about selecting players that exemplify and exhibit the greatness and spirit of the game of football. And to me, Frank Gore is that to a T and then some. So I just thought it was hilarious that there was this like outrage when people said they didn't think Frank Gore was a Hall of Famer, and there was this like huge like war about it. And I understand people are very passionate about Frank Gore. He was a great 49er, and he still shows a lot of love to the fan base. But it was like so funny to me that this like mad dude for like 3 days on Twitter, there was this like huge back and forth on if Frank Gore is a Hall of Famer or not. And again, for me, I personally think he is. I didn't think that there would be that much discussion around it. So I was kind of blown away. I'm like, wow, this is actually like a pretty heated talking point for a lot of people. And it's more of a debate than I expected it to be. Some people who I really respect made some good points why they wouldn't have him there. Again, it's a no-brainer for me. I'd put him in on the first ballot. I already think it's a travesty that Patrick Willis wasn't first ballot. So maybe the committee redeems themselves a bit in 49er land and they get Frank Gore. And yeah, just really quickly, I forgot to touch on that earlier. Frank Gore's a Hall of Famer, man. I respect anybody's right to disagree and not agree with my opinions. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm right and you're wrong. To me, Frank Gore's a Hall of Famer, and I'm not really even going to get into it beyond that because I think it speaks for itself. Coach, what's going on? Glad you could stop by. What's going on, my guy? Bryant saying Frank is going to be the Hall of Fame first ballot. The Niners will retire 21 to the Ring of Honor. Yeah, they absolutely have to retire the number. It 100% belongs there. This may sound blasphemous to the older 49ers fans, and I completely understand that. When you watch guys like Montana and Rice and Lott and Roger Craig, Charles Haley, Steve Young, Deion Sanders, like when you're watching that greatness, I can understand it. But to me, Frank Gore has a strong case when we're talking about like legacy, impact, beloved by the fans, what his like the time he was there when he really transitioned between an era of really, really good 49ers football and then kind of making that resurgent effort under Jim Harbaugh. I think that I could make a case that Frank Gore belongs on like a Mount Rushmore of 49ers players of all time. This isn't just ability. Again, this factors in what he meant to the franchise, what he means to the fan base, his legacy, all of those things. I think that Frank Gore is one of the 4 iconic 49ers of all time. And maybe it's a take where, again, I'm sitting here and I'm 26 years old and somebody that watched Montana and that dynasty in the 80s is like, no, there's no way. Maybe they only have players from that time period. But I think what Frank Gore was able to represent and what he was able to do during a time when the 49ers were transitioning from this model franchise, this all-time great, sports franchise into mediocrity and then making that rise again. Frank Gore was the symbol of hope for a lot of people that kept them engaged with the 49ers as they transitioned into this new era of 49ers football we're in now. So again, I can see why people would disagree. And I'm not sitting here and saying, because it'd be really hard, to be honest with you, if we're going purely based off ability, like it would probably be Montana and Rice, Steve Young, and then like one of Ronnie Lott or Patrick Willis. But at the same time, like I also think it's not right to just only have it confined to those like 15 years. I think that Frank Gore is somebody that I could strongly make a case for belongs in that discussion with those players. I'm probably going to write something about it pretty soon too. I'm trying to focus on draft stuff. I also will be in the draft. My credentials are in and everything. So I will be in the draft in Vegas at the end of this month. So I'll do some streams from there. Maybe I can find somewhere in the media room to set up and we could do some cool stuff from there. But I'm going to be focused on draft stuff now, but I might come back to this Frank Gore thing and write about it because I do think it's a very polarizing topic that a lot of people are very passionate about. And I would love to hear what people think about, my take here where, Bryant makes a great point. He really was the bright spot of the team during some really dark years and kind of spearheaded that transition into them being a football team that not only was taken seriously, but was one of the best teams in the league competing for Super Bowls and making the playoffs and having these deep playoff runs. I think Frank Gore and everything he means to this team and everything that he symbolizes would make him one of the 4 greatest 49ers of all time. Maybe I'll put that on Twitter after I get off this live and I'll see. Maybe people will be outraged and call me names and say I'm stupid for it, but I actually feel that way. So I'm going to stand on it. I believe it. So that's where I'm at with that. He said Heinz saying the Gore Hall of Fame talk is like MCU's Civil War. I really think so too. I think that it is. I think it's something that, again, if you're on one side or the other, you're probably not going to budge at this point, but that's what makes sports debates fun. I will say this, though. It's pretty bold of anybody to say Frank Gore is in the Hall of Famer, given how beloved he is by the franchise. So even though I strongly disagree with the opinion, I can respect anybody that's willing to come out and say that, knowing the backlash they're going to get. I just, again, can't personally get behind that. I think Frank Gore is a no doubt Hall of Famer. I think Roger Craig's a no doubt Hall of Famer. And I think Patrick Willis is a no doubt Hall of Famer. And I think the Hall of Fame itself will be much better off when all three of those gentlemen ultimately earn their entry into that prestigious club. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. So we're at a little over an hour. Cynthia, what is going on? I hope you're having a fantastic Saturday night. We're a little over an hour in. If you guys have any draft questions about stuff, or if you want to throw an opinion up about, how you felt about Deebo Samuel with his Instagram thing this week, maybe something about the Frank Gore discussion we just went through, a draft player you really like, maybe a free agent who's still available you like, I'm happy to throw it up. The last couple Saturday night streams have gotten a little off topic, which I have no problem with. Like last week, we spent like 40 minutes arguing about like tacos, which was fun. I had a great time. But I'm just, if it gets to that, it gets to that. If not, no worries. But I am also at the point now where I kind of am wrapped up with the discussions I wanted to have specifically and the mock draft we did. So again, I want to provide a platform if there's anything that anybody watching wants to talk about, if there's an opinion you'd like to share, a question you might have. And if we can get something like that rolling, I'm happy to keep it going. If not, I'll probably wrap it up. Also, just a heads up, this week I have some great draft content planned with a few people who are really, really, really good. They're either writing for scouting sites or doing some kind of work with draft prospects or draft prospects themselves. So I'm really excited. This week should be pretty jam-packed with some draft specific stuff with some people that are much smarter than myself. So you guys don't have to sit here and listen to me ramble in front of the camera. I'll let them have the floor and share why they really like certain players. I had Karan Jangra on Thursday, I believe it was, who is a just brilliant mind, really good. One of the few people who I stop what I'm doing when I see him post a prospect that I haven't heard of, and I immediately start diving into them and looking into them as a prospect. That was on Thursday. If you guys want to check that out, it was pretty good. He did a mock. He went over some players that we talked about today, gave some great insight. I didn't see who Barrows took on his mock, to be honest with you, BSE. If you want to put like the first couple picks in the comments, I could give you my opinion. I unfortunately didn't see it. I've had a pretty hectic week this week, so that's why I don't want to make excuses. That's why I haven't been streaming as often. So haven't got the chance to see it yet, but if you want to throw a couple of the picks up, I'd be happy to let you know. Brian asked, do I think Ayuk will have more receiving yards than Deebo this year? No, but I don't think it would be crazy that he might. Like, I think that we're at a point now where the Niners really do have two very, very talented receivers that could almost ultimately be a 1A, 1B type situation, which is phenomenal when you think about the fact that Deebo Samuel is coming off of a historic season and coming off of a season where Jalen Ramsey's saying that he's a top 3 receiver in this league. So yeah, I think it's possible. I'm just going to say no for now, Brian, just because I'm going to give Deebo Samuel the benefit of the doubt. He's playing like a top 5 wide receiver in this league right now. And I think that until I see it happen otherwise, I'm going to assume he's still going to be that receiving leader for the team. But I don't think it's crazy, like the thought. I don't think it's a, out there question at all. I think it's very within the realm of possibility. So Justin's asking if the amount they pay Deebo dictates what they can pay Ayuk if he has a big year next year. Ayuk still has a 5th-year option. That's the biggest difference between these guys. That 5th-year option is still pretty healthy, and it definitely aids things a little bit when you talk about these negotiations and these guys being willing to come in and play on that deal versus, the uncertainty that comes with not having the 5th-year option. So every contract's going to have some kind of effect on other ones, but is it going to prevent them from signing Ayuk next year? No. I think realistically they could keep both of them. I think that's the goal. I think they'd like to keep both of them, and I don't see a reason why they wouldn't be able to personally. So I guess the Barrows mock had Drake Jackson at 61. For those of you who don't know, Drake Jackson is an edge rusher out of USC. I really, really like Drake Jackson. I thought going into this past college season, after watching last year and the year before, I thought Drake Jackson was going to be a top 15 pick. I thought he would be one of these guys talked about at the top of the draft where he just looked like this phenomenal talent, had this great pass rushing bag, looked to me like just an absolute stud. He came in a bit undersized towards the end of the season, but I've heard that he put on 25 pounds since the season ended. So he's a guy where if the 49ers take him, he might be a little bit raw and need some development, but he could end up being a really, really, really solid player for the team. So if that's how the board actually fell and Drake Jackson was there at 61, I absolutely love it. So, shout out to Matt Barrows. He's a fantastic writer for him putting that mock together, because I would absolutely be thrilled with Drake Jackson at 61. Brian's asking how high will this offense rank this season? I think they'll still be. I think that the floor is a top 15 unit. They'll be in the top half of the league. I would say somewhere in the top 12. To me, it's unrealistic to expect that Trey Lance is going to come in right away and just pilot this top 5 offense overall, top 4 offense, whatever. It's possible, sure, but I'm not counting on it. So if we're being realistic, I'd say somewhere in the top 12 is a good starting point. Tony's asking if I will be on the Ezra Gray space tomorrow. If I'm not doing anything, I'd love to. I don't know exactly. I have a couple things I'm waiting to hear back on. So if I can, I absolutely will. And again, I'll share that with you guys so you can check it out regardless. But I will try, Tony. We'll see. Brian's asking who will lead the Niners in touchdowns this season. I'm going to say George Kittle. I think George Kittle has a season where he gets utilized a little bit more in the red zone, and George Kittle has a big year. I think George Kittle's due for a big season. I think he's a guy that's going to end up, which is wild when you think about the fact that he was breaking records just a couple years ago, still looked at as one of the top tight ends in the league. I think Kittle is going to have a really, really big season. And I think Kittle at times is still the number 1 receiving option on this team, given what he can do in space and given how you can isolate him on linebackers and safeties and the mismatches that you can get using him. So I will say George Kittle, Brian, and that's kind of just right now in the middle of April. That's where I'm at with it. Let's see. Would I choose edge or O-line first? It depends who's there. I would say edge just because I think there's a more realistic path to an edge player making an impact sooner at that spot at 61. I don't have access to how Mike McGlinchey's healing or his medicals or anything, so that does play a huge role in this because I don't think there's a huge need where they would need to take a center at 61. I think they can wait till their 2 third-round picks to take a center. And I don't think there's a huge need at either guard spot that would make me feel so compelled to take a guard there. And obviously Trent Williams is playing left tackle. So the only real question mark is what's going on with Mike McGlinchey, the right tackle spot and whatnot. I'm taking edge just because, again, I think there's a more plausible path to snaps there. And I think it's just such a premium position. You can never have too many edge rushers. I have never heard an NFL GM or an NFL coach come to a podium and complain and be upset that they had too many guys that could get after the passer and rush the opposing team's quarterback. So I'm going edge. That would be my pick. BSE is saying that he thinks that they'll throw the ball way more than they did with Jimmy. Trey has better ball security than Jimmy. Outside of that ball the only one that I really didn't like was that throw that he threw to Kittle in the Texans game, the underthrow he had on that wheel route. I appreciate him taking the shot. I know he had another pick in that game against Arizona where he kind of overthrew Travis Benjamin. I had no issue with that ball. The placement wasn't great. It obviously ended up in the arms of a Cardinals defender, but I like that instead of tucking and running, which he could have done, he looked to push the ball downfield and make a throw, which is what you're going to have to eventually be comfortable doing, even with his physical ability. So I think a couple of the turnovers he had were kind of overblown. He's somebody that did take care of the ball a ton at North Dakota State. So maybe they do feel more comfortable. Maybe they do feel more comfortable taking shots downfield and throwing to the intermediate level. So it wouldn't surprise me. I still think they're going to run the ball a ton. I think they're going to still try to run the ball 30, 35 times a game and have that be the ultimate goal every week. Justin loves trading down from 61 to 78, grabbing an extra pick and grabbing Greg Dulcich, the tight end out of UCLA. Mr. Dulcich had the best mustache in the draft for however that may affect people's draft rankings. It was definitely something that stood out when watching him run around on the field. So Dulcich is a guy that I know some people really like. So that's Justin's guy there. Brian saying both need some help. Yeah, I think that they definitely do need to add an extra edge player. I think they definitely do need to add somebody that's young on a rookie deal that can develop into that high-end talent for them. So I definitely agree with you on that. I think that I'm there with Cynthia too. Edge would be where I'm at with this. Brian's asking, will this be the year the Niners run back a kickoff for a touchdown? I like Gregory McLeod. I think they could do it. I thought that a couple times they got close last season. They just couldn't obviously put it together. I will say yes. I will play the law of averages and assume that it balances out. And this year they do run it back. I think the special teams will be much, much, much improved compared to where it was last season in a lot of facets. I think the blocking will be better. The coverage will be better. And as a result, the return game will be better as well. So, yeah, I think that they will. I think that that's something that definitely is a realistic scenario. So I definitely think that. Brian saying the last time was 2014. Wow. Wow. No, I think they ran a kickback, I believe, in 2018, Brian. Richie James, I think, against Seattle was the last one that I can remember. I could be wrong, but I think it was 2018 against Seattle. Yeah, BSC saying field position. Hey, field position matters. I understand that people don't get excited to, oh my God, a punt just got down inside the 10-yard line, or, oh, they flipped field position. Oh, you want to see touchdowns. You want to see sacks and picks and all that. You want to see exciting stuff. Field position is extremely, extremely, extremely important. And the 49ers had, if I recall correctly, one of the worst starting field positions on average, and their opponents had some of the best starting field position on average. And then when you factor in that leading to them when they're going 3 and out, they're giving the ball back. Teams are getting the ball in their own 45-yard line near midfield. I just am at the point now where it's something that needs to be talked about, and I'm glad they addressed it because it is something that has been an issue for a while. And I talked about it a few times last year. It's not really, again, something that people get super excited. It's not a talking point that a lot of people want to hear, but field position is so important in the NFL. And especially when you have such a dominant defense, make the other team work to score points. It's extremely hard to score against the 49ers defense. And when you give teams longer fields, it's going to be more difficult to score against them. Like, I understand what I'm saying is just common sense, but it's wild how much people brush off the importance of field position. So I'm not surprised in the slightest that BSE is on it. He's usually on point with all of it. So I totally agree with that. Heinz asking, do I think Ebukam gets extended? I think the 49ers are going to wait and see. I think right now his cap hit at like $8 million or whatever it is totally plausible. I think it's totally, it's fair. It's an understandable, point. But I don't think that they're going to rush to do it now. I don't think they need to do it for cap space or anything like that. And I think that the 49ers want to see a little bit of consistency and see a little bit of, again, consistency. That's the word I'm looking for. They want to see some consistency and see that he can do it in back-to-back years. So I definitely agree that it's something that is worth talking about, but we really don't know what they're going to do with it until we see Ebukam on the field again and see if it was just a flash in the pan or if he's that guy that can genuinely develop into somebody that they should re-sign for 3 years and some, good chunk of guaranteed money. I don't think he's ever going to get like top edge rusher money, but he's definitely a physical athlete that's proven he can affect the game as a pass rusher. So if he doesn't work consistently, then that's something they have to look at. Absolutely. Let's see. Justin's asking, are you thinking about taking Breece Hall or Kenneth Walker if they're at 61? No, I'm not taking a running back that early, to be honest. The only running back in recent years that I was just like screaming from the mountaintops I would draft and I would take high was Javonte Williams last year. I would have taken Javonte Williams in the second round last year. I think where he got picked, great value for Denver. I think he's a really good running back. There's nobody that I'm looking at in this class where I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I think Javonte Williams would far and away be the best running back in this class. So there's not really anybody I'm looking at this year that I would be willing to take. And Javonte Williams went at like 36, I think 37. I apologize for not having the exact pick. He was somewhere in the mid 30s. There's nobody even at 61 that I'm looking at where I would take. So no would be my answer. And I think they're fine running backs. I just think for the 49ers, like I'm still upset that they traded up for trades. Not upset, but like I still can't wrap my head around why they traded up for Trey Sermon last year. Like that just made no sense to me then. Makes no sense to me now. So I would like to see them not spend super high picks on running backs unless, and this is just my opinion, unless I feel really good about said player. And I don't really feel that way about Hall or Walker the way I did last year about Williams. So I just personally wouldn't do it. I think they'll be good for the players that, for the teams they end up on, they'll be good players and whatnot. No, I can't do it. BSC saying he's a great player, created all of his yardage on his own, but he's not a second rounder. Yeah, I kind of agree. Hey, if a team gets him in the third round, fourth, it's ironic if a team took him where the Niners took Sermon last year. I think that's great value. If the Niners were to take him at 93, would have been good value. I would not like to see them take a running back in the third round in back-to-back years. And especially if they're not able to get on the field, that would look really, really bad. Hind is saying Pierre Strong, 5th round. Pierre Strong ran the fastest 40 time out of any running back at the combine. So naturally people are like, hey, like Mostert's gone. We need some speed, get some top end north to south speed, a good runner in space. I would agree with that. I think that he's somebody who, if you took there in the 5th round again, I've kind of drifted towards Devonta Price. I like Hassan Haskins a lot for different reasons. I don't think he's the same burner that Pierre Strong is, but I know a lot of people really do like Pierre Strong, and I can see why. I just personally am leaning a little bit more Haskins, a little bit more Price, but I think the value is absolutely there in the 5th round. Michael's saying it's important for the German has to be a DN. So I personally, Michael, I disagree. I think that in this day and age, it's really not as important because so many of these defenses at the collegiate level are some kind of hybrid between both. And you get guys who are 3-4 outside linebackers where teams ask them to put their hands in the dirt, or they're asking guys that are traditional 4-3 ends to stand up on the outside. I think ultimately, it's not as big of a deal as it gets made out to be at times. And the 49ers have had tremendous success. Dee Ford came from a 3-4 scheme. He looked great within their defense. Ebukam did the same thing last year. He played all his snaps in LA as a stand-up 3-4 outside backer, and they put him in the scheme, putting his hand in the dirt in a 4-3. I just don't think it's a huge deal because so much, again, of what these guys are running at college are defending these spread offenses where they're out in some kind of sub package, and they're not really ever in those base defenses enough to the point where it's like back in the day where you're getting so many reps mentally and physically from a base defense that it's going to throw you off. Everything is sub packages pretty much in college. And the NFL is actually catching up to college in that sense, where they're kind of adapting a bit to the way the collegiate game has been played. So I really, if you, there's an athlete that you really like D'Angelo Malone's a guy that was a more traditional 3-4 stand-up outside backer. I still think he'd be great in a 4-3 scheme, and Seattle had interest. I think he'd be great for the 49ers. I just don't think that you're very dependent on that mold. That base defense to me doesn't really matter. The 49ers spent last season in the 3/4 of their snaps were in a sub package on defense. So to me, the whole 4-3, 3-4 thing, it's not preventing me from taking a player at this point. And especially if the worst case scenario is that you need to coach them up a little bit, then you do that. And like we saw with a guy like Ebukam last year, as the season went on and he got more comfortable, the physical ability is all that really mattered and took over as he got more comfortable in that role. So I just personally don't really, feel like I think it gets a lot more gets made out to be than it needs to be when it comes to, this whole 4-3, 3-4 talk. I don't want to say it's irrelevant, but the NFL your sub package, your nickel defense is pretty much your base defense in the modern NFL. And I think that there's plenty of room to add anybody who's good at rushing the passer, regardless of their background in base defense. If you can get after the passer, we'll find a role for you in our sub package. And I think that's kind of where the 49ers are at. BSC makes a great point. Yeah, the majority of college defenses are a 3-3-5 or a 4-2-5. You even see guys like Gary Patterson, where he has 6 defensive backs out there on the field here. He was doing that at TCU for a while. So it's very different now. And there's a ton of spread offenses, and the air raid's really prevalent all over the place. So these guys are getting better at operating in space. So a lot of the time, it's just to me hey, if you can get after the passer, that's all that matters. I don't care what your background is nearly as much when it comes to base defense. I don't think the responsibilities are the same, where you're going to have a guy in a traditional 3-4 where he's, used to having his hand in the dirt and he's now standing up and setting the edge against the run. You can take a guy that has that pass rushing ability and just turn them into a specialist. And I think the 49ers have gotten really good at that, where they're able to identify these guys and turn them into quality rotational players on the defensive line. And that's kind of where I'm at with that. So I think it's definitely an interesting point. I just personally am at the point where, again, if you can get after the passer, that's all that's going to matter to the 49ers. So that's where I'm at. I'll see if I missed any questions. Again, if you guys have anything else or any other points you want to bring up, doesn't have to be a question. You can state an opinion. We can talk about that too. I'm far from the knower of all things. So if there's something that you guys want to talk about or a prospect you like, throw it up and we'll chat about it. I don't see any that I missed. So I think we're pretty much caught up. So, I'll give you guys a minute or so. And if you want to get it together, again, this one was fun. If you just joined now, we did a mock draft earlier. We talked about some Deebo Samuel stuff. We talked about we talked about Frank Gore. I think that there was some good conversation there. So if you want to go back and watch, please feel free. I appreciate it. I'll get to this one real quick. Brian's asking, should players be allowed to have social media? Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that there's any restrictions you should be able to put on players for anything. I think players are, I'm always very pro player. And as long as you're not going out and actively being a detriment to your franchise with your actions in public and on social media, I have no issue with it. And I think especially in this day and age, I spend all day on Twitter. Who am I to, say players can't do the same thing? So I think they absolutely should. And I think what they do with it, again, as long as they are not harming others or hurting others or bringing anybody down with what they're doing, I don't see the issue in it. I'm pro player on that. So I would say yes, Brian. I think they absolutely should be allowed to. And again, it's a matter of them conducting themselves in a way that's respectful and professional, which I don't think I've seen anybody on the 49ers who's currently on the roster ever do anything that I wouldn't deem either of those things. And I don't think Deebo Samuel scrubbing his Instagram is childish or unprofessional or anything that I've seen thrown around. I personally think that he is doing what's best for him, and I can't fault him in the slightest for doing that. BSC saying, Noah Sewell will be a top 10 pick next year. Yes or no? Be a Patriot. Yeah, I think so. I watched Oregon, Ohio State, I think, because I was watching Veron McKinley. So he could, yeah. I think he would be a total Bill Belichick pick too, for what it's worth. I could see it. I don't know next year's board enough, to be honest with you. The only player that I've extensively scouted that I'm really excited about is Will Anderson. Honestly, I think Will Anderson's he's going to end up being the best player in that draft, and there'll be quarterbacks probably going 1 and 2. But I think Will Anderson, it's going to be that year that I think it was the year that Wentz and Goff got drafted, that Joey Bosa got drafted 3rd and clearly became the best of the 3. I think the same thing's going to happen next year with Will Anderson. No disrespect to Stroud and Bryce Young and whoever gets picked at the top. I think Will Anderson's going to end up being the best player that gets taken. So beyond that, though, I'll be honest with you, I haven't really dove too deep into that class, so I don't really know how the top 10 is going to shake out, but I can see it happening. And again, that feels like such a Bill Belichick pick too, where he ends up going to the Patriots and ends up being this really good player. So I could see it for sure. Any chance D'Amico Ryans likes what Leo Chenal doing the D-line, moving around like a chess piece? I'm sure there is a chance. I know I talked to Justin a bit about this. He mentioned that was one of his ideas was you take Leo Chenal, linebacker out of Wisconsin, and you can kind of move him around a little bit, kind of similar to how Dallas utilized Michael Parson last year. You're able to have him drop in coverage as an inside backer. You can rush the passer with him. You can have him rush the A gap, the B gap. You can have him outside, rushing the edge as well. I'm sure there's a chance that it could happen. I don't know, I haven't been keeping up to date with the visit tracker for every single player. So I don't know if the 49ers have spoken with him or if that's something that they've looked into personally, but I think the theory is really cool. And I think that it definitely makes a lot of sense. And it's a copycat league. When you see a team utilize Micah Parsons the way the Cowboys did, a lot of teams are going to be looking for another player they can utilize in a similar way. So I think that's something definitely to keep track of. Brian saying if the teams go over the salary cap, what really happens? I believe they get fined and lose draft picks. I think I don't know the exact sequential order of how it happens, but I believe that's the consequences are fines and loss of draft picks if they do go over. So I can't tell you the specifics. I apologize for that. But if I am not mistaken, those are the two things that ends up happening. Because he's saying he's a special player. Will Anderson's great. Will Anderson's fantastic. I'll be honest with you. I don't see what the big fuss is about Aiden Hutchinson. I know Will Anderson's not getting drafted this year. He's not coming out in this draft. But I thought it was absurd that this whole, talking about Aiden Hutchinson for Heisman, Aiden Hutchinson this, Aiden Hutchinson that all year. And I'm like, dude, Will Anderson's a way better player than me. He looks like a much better athlete. He looks like a much better edge rusher. I'm watching all this SEC tape for all these other guys. And every single time I do, I'm like, dude, this guy, Will Anderson, is wrecking games. 31 is everywhere. He's in the backfield. He's sacking quarterbacks. He's getting out in space and making plays. He just was all over the place. So I think Will Anderson is going to be a really, really special player next year for whoever gets him. So we're coming up again on an hour and a half here. I think I'm pretty caught up with all the questions. Unless you guys had anything else you wanted to talk about, I will probably cut this off pretty soon. So please get out the next, few if you do. And if not, I'll answer whatever's left and then probably cut this off. Let you guys get back to enjoying your Saturday night. Justin's asking, have I seen the UCLA running back? I'm going to guess it's Charbonnet. I hope I'm not messing the pronunciation up. I haven't watched him extensively. I've heard some people really like him. I haven't had the chance to watch him extensively. To be honest with you, I've been focusing most of my scouting on safeties, offensive linemen, whether it's guards, centers, tackles, all, take your pick. Edges, and then I've been watching some receivers, but it's been mostly safeties, edge players, and offensive line. So I haven't seen it, to be honest. BSE is saying that LSU has a monster year next year too. Hey, I'd like to see it. Football is more fun when LSU is good, when these traditional programs are really good. It's always fun to see Death Valley on a Saturday night when it's a packed house. I definitely think that's something fun. And when the season gets closer and stuff comes in, maybe we could do some college football stuff too. If you guys have a team that you root for, or players you really like, we could talk about it during the season. I love talking college football too. I think I'm a Cal fan, so I would love to hear more about your guys' teams that actually have a chance at winning something and have a chance of doing something other than disappoint you year after year after year after year. So maybe we can get into that. But I think that I'm probably going to end up wrapping this up pretty soon, because I think it's getting to the point where I think we got most of the questions answered. We got most of the stuff covered. I appreciate everybody for coming by and watching. This was a super fun stream, but I'll save some of the other stuff. I'm going to do something, I think, tomorrow. I could be wrong, but I should be doing something tomorrow, and I'll try to have some stuff throughout this week as well. Again, I have some stuff lined up with some great draft minds that are some really good scouts, really good at what they do. So we'll get into that, and I'll get some more specific stuff so you can hear about some thoughts on edge players that might be good for the Niners, some thoughts about some safeties that are good for the 49ers, and hear it from some folks who've been scouting these players for the past couple seasons, and not like me, where I'm just going into game tape the last month and a half, 6 weeks, whatever it's been. So we'll do that. As I'm getting out of here, Brian's saying I have to get a residency hat. Hey, Brad has the plug. Brad needs to give me that social influencer code, or whatever code he has as a social media kingpin, as he is. But for now, I got my Sharks hat, man. Been a rough year, been a rough couple years, but I will support my guys no matter what. So I'm going to keep rocking the Sharks hat for now, Brian. But if the residency hat comes, if Brad wants to help a guy out, I'd be more than happy to throw it on. But yeah, for now, it's the Sharks hat. I got to ride out this season and see where they go, because it feels weird. I got so used to them being in the playoffs every season. It's been quite strange the last couple of years, just knowing that they're not very good. But you have a good time. And I know people came here for football stuff. They don't want to hear about hockey, but real quick, I did get to I went to the game on Tuesday night, and I got to see Connor McDavid for the first time. And for anybody who watches hockey, I understand exactly why people talk about this guy the way they do. It was absolutely incredible watching this guy play. And he actually scored in overtime on a breakaway, like 15 feet in front of me to end the game. And normally I'd be like super, like bummed, like, oh, the Sharks lost, like leaving all deflated. I walked out, like, to me, it's like the equivalent to me of watching like one of these star quarterbacks in the NFL, or one of these up and coming like superstar players like beating your team, where it's like, yeah, you're up. It's like kind of like the Packers game. I'm not gonna lie, the Packers game, I was sitting there and I was kind of like, well, that kind of sucks. But Aaron Rodgers just did, he had this Hall of Fame drive, and what was it, 37 seconds or something like that. It didn't hurt nearly as much as if like some nobody, walks your team off, or some lesser known player ends up being the final straw. So yeah, McDavid, he was insane. Watching him skate around, it was an absolute treat. So as much as the Shark season was a bummer, I got to watch him and Ovechkin both score goals in person for the first time. So that was super cool this year. But I'll save the hockey talk for another stream. I don't want to bore people and get them, ruin the Saturday night with my boring hockey talk. But we'll get into it, because the Stanley Cup playoffs, I will tell this, for any of you guys who aren't super into hockey, turn on a playoff game when the playoffs come up in the next couple of weeks, and I promise you that you will be surprised at how much different watching in the regular season is compared to the playoffs, and you might get hooked. I have friends that never really cared about hockey, and I get them to start watching when the playoffs are on. The atmosphere is insane. It, to me, is more electric than the NBA playoffs, the NFL playoffs, MLB, all that stuff. Like, it's a totally different level. So I'll end on that. Go Sharks. They'll be in the playoffs next year. We'll talk about it then. But thank you guys all for coming by. I really appreciate it. I hope everybody has a fantastic rest of their Saturday night. I'll probably be back tomorrow doing something. If not tomorrow, I'll definitely be back Monday. So until then,